Hello, fellow truth seekers. This is Doug coming to you again on this here Shabbat. I want to tell you how much I appreciate all you folks, and I love you, and thank you for subscribing and watching. I know sometimes these videos kind of go a little long, so this study I'm going to try to keep it a little shorter and break it up into multiple videos so it ain't so long, because this is a pretty important subject that is basically what's going on in our society today. And I've mentioned this kind of briefly in previous videos about the spirits that have kind of taken over America. I believe that they were elements of people here that were already trying to usher them in, but I think they really kind of came on real strong beginning in the early 1960s, because that's when the attack on prayer in schools, the Ten Commandments, removing anything to do with Elohim out of the mainstream society, out of the government, out of the town square, and relegating it to a church building somewhere. And then, of course, as soon as this begins to happen, then you see the coming in of the sexual revolution in the later part of the 60s, which is another goddess coming onto the scene. And she goes by a lot of different names. And then of course in the early 70s you see the introduction of another one. The first one that come in is Baal. He's sort of the chief among them. And he's, seen throughout Scripture. The people of Israel continuously, go from worshiping the true Elohim to worshiping these false gods and goddesses over and over and over again, and of course it ultimately leads to their demise and being taken out of the land and enslaved and kind of dispersed everywhere. And then you have the second one, Ashtoreth or Ashtoreth or Ishtar or Queen of Heaven or the Blessed Virgin Mary, or on and on at names that Astarte, Easter, names that talking about the same entity. In the scriptures, it's usually she's mentioned as Ashtoreth or the Queen of Heaven. Then you have Moloch. And he's the one that they always are talked about sacrificing their children to. In Topek and Hinnom, and early on in Scripture, back in Deuteronomy and Leviticus and all, it talks about them already. The Father's telling them, don't do this. Don't do, and it's talking about in the context of the other people around there, the Canaanites and the Amorites and them that are worshiping these gods. And a lot of times those Canaanites and Amorites and different ones, the Rephaim, the Zanzumim, like I said, the Amorites and the Hittites and Horites and them people, they are hybrids. And they are worshiping these demonic entities that are the offspring, they were the offspring of those fallen watchers in Genesis 6 that, they're wandering spirits. So they, and they are under the leadership of the fallen ones. Hasatan, Satan, the Satan, the one at the top of their king, that's over them, because it says that Beelzebub in Matthew, I believe it's Matthew chapter 12, that Beelzebub is the prince of the demons, of the devils or whatever. He's not the king, he is the prince. And so, and they have a king over them, and of course that king is the top of the fallen angel hierarchy. And so, he goes by Beelzebub, Baal Peor, and generally whenever it has these additional Baal Hermon, or, it's talking about in relation to a location somewhere. Hermon is a mountain, and and they had a center of worship there to these deities, because that's where the fallen ones first came down. Excuse me. First came down there, and of course they, these are their offspring. These deities that these people are worshiping, Baal and Ashtoreth, and of course, in a lot of the mythology, like in Babylon and places like that, Ashtoreth is the mother of all these entities, the wife of El, or whatever, and that, but that's in the Babylonian mythos, and in some of the other, the Assyrian, maybe kind of talk about that as well. But then there's some that say that she is the daughter of Enki and Enlil or something like that, these other gods. And so you just kind of have to take it, you start seeing a kind of a blending of these entities, but, the scripture is what I tend to go by. And I think that they are the offspring of these fallen ones. And because originally, when they sired these offspring, they did it so that they could use, their offspring could usurp the authority of man here on the earth, and so that they could rule the earth by proxy through them, and that was their agenda, was because they could not usurp Adam's authority here on earth, because they were forbidden to, but they figured the way to get around that was to create this hybrid offspring that was part human, and that would kind of exempt them from that prohibition, but in the long run it really didn't. So now the way they do is they just take control over human beings and get them to rule according to what they want, by proxy, by offering them the world essentially, or the things of the world, and then they lead them towards the worship of these false gods, these Baal and Ashtoreth, and they do it every time. People do it every time, and again, it's because of promises of power, wealth, notoriety, whatever they look to. Excuse me. They look to appeal to the individual's lust, whatever their lust is, and I've talked about this, how these entities have been around for a long time, so they understand human nature, and they also will watch a certain individual and from from when they're little or whatever, and they'll see what their particular characteristics are, and what they lust after, and so they begin to kind of try and mold them from an early age if they can, if they can get a hold of them in some way, either through school or through peers or whatever means that they can to draw them away from the truth and draw them to their narrative of truth, and begin to try to take possession of the person, and then from that point on lead their life to bring them to a position somewhere that they want to, whether it is in government or in entertainment or in industry or wherever they want to put them at to obtain their objective. And of course we see how there have been certain families that and I'm not going to get into the names of these families, but they're at the top, and so they've been being groomed for thousands of years, and they're hybrids. They've allowed themselves back in ancient times to be altered, or even maybe some of their ancestors allowed themselves to mate with some of these fallen ones to produce these offspring, these hybrids, and they've been continually modifying them ever since, so that they got to a point where you couldn't really tell the difference between them and a regular human being, and so now they sit up there at the top of the human hierarchy of powers, and they govern from behind the scenes, and they do it through money. Because listen to what the scripture says: the love of money is the root of all evil. The love of money. It's not money within itself. Money is just a tool, just like any other tool that can be used for good or bad. But it's people's love of it that really causes it to be corrupting. And so they know that, and they use that as probably their primary or chief weapon against humanity, because they understand men's lust for money and their love for money. So it's relatively easy to get people to do what you want. And again, they use they don't directly most of the time do something to you. They use people, and the ones that they've already captured and that are under their influence to obtain or to fulfill their objectives. And through secret societies like the Freemasons, the Illuminists, which really essentially the Illuminati got intertwined in with the Freemasons. But then you have others like the Jesuits and the Order of the Snake and other organizations that are secret societies that have been a small group that has been promoting this agenda, for hundreds and hundreds of years, even thousands of years, and they've been the guardians of this secret knowledge. It's funny how during the so-called Age of Enlightenment in the early 1700s, when they, after Copernicus, which kind of changed people's paradigm and began to draw them away from Scripture and more towards science, reason. The Age of Enlightenment. We're gonna depend on science to give us the answers. Science, falsely so called. And I'm not saying that science itself is a bad thing. If it gives us truth, and the truth of how things work and how things are through empirical study. But whenever you create science to form a narrative, and you promote that narrative against it becomes a dogmatic religion that promotes lies. And when anybody challenges it, in academia or whatever, they blackball you. I mean, and they, consider you a heretic or a charlatan. And just like a religion, I mean, it's become a religion. And so these people that gravitated to that, that want to believe those lies, began to form these like the Illuminati, and of course the people say, "Oh, conspiracy theory." Well, it's not. I mean, you got Weinsapp, who was a German that was financed and groomed by the Rothschilds to form this group called the Illuminati over in Germany in like 1711, somewhere along in there, and they recruited, same way that whenever they infiltrated into the Freemasons there in France, they weren't going in there to try and bring this to the masses. No, they were going in there and using the Freemasons as a recruitment tool, as a way to reach people who were like-minded and bring them under the Illuminati. But they kind of selectively pick and choose. You got most of the people that are in, the Masons are what they call porch Masons. I mean, they don't make it very far up through the degrees. It's the ones that make it up to like the 33rd degree that are the ones that they approach and want to bring on into the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians and stuff, and bring them up to higher degrees. I mean, supposedly these degrees go up into the hundreds. And so it's just a way to when you get the people that reach the 33rd degree, you can see that these people are dedicated to it. They're dedicated to this idea. And that's when they reveal to them that it's Luciferian, that they're worshiping Lucifer. So then, and if they accept that, then of course they look at them and say, we can use these people. And so they take them into the higher mysteries or whatever of it, and give them more illumination. That's where it comes from. The word Illuminati basically means illumination, but it's through selected people. And then over time, these people would be used and placed into positions of authority and in academia to promote these ideas, and to teach those who would go out into the school system and promote these ideas. And now you see, and they would, no matter how insane these ideas are, when you have it coming from so-called authorities or experts, the elitist in the halls of academia, and they always promote these people, with the media and stuff. They put them way up on a pedestal, so that whenever students, really bright minds, young people, they're automatically drawn to these people. Oh, these, I want to be under this tutelage of this guy because he's the expert. He's the and so they're highly sought after. Just like it says in Scripture that they would have itching ears, going after these teachers, and they do. They go after them thinking that they're going to get true knowledge, and of course what they're getting is a narrative, that is going to lead them to Luciferianism, and so they teach them and indoctrinate them with this here, and then of course they go out either into industry or into academia themselves, or into the public school systems, and they begin to teach this stuff to our children, and of course conditioning them, and for them to do the same. And this is kind of what's been going on ever since. And so we see beginning, like I said, there in the early 60s, Baal sort of is like the one that comes in first and kind of gets things started and provides the way for the next one. And then that one kind of provides, because once you have sexual immorality going crazy, and then, you start having the homosexual and transgender agenda began to come on the scene. Well, the free love, which is an attack on marriage and family. Then you have to have abortion to take care of all the accidents, so-called accidents through this free love and stuff like that. And so then here shows up Moloch, and you begin the sacrifice of the children to the god Moloch. And it's really ironic. I mean, when you really begin to look at this, and somebody that I think has really done a great job of revealing this is Jonathan Cahn. Again, I'm not some things I don't really agree with Jonathan. One is letting people call him rabbi. I wished he wouldn't do that. But that aside, he's a pretty learned man, and he's a Jew, and so he's well versed in Hebrew. So he can kind of he's grown up, but he is he's a Christian, and of course it took quite a bit of coaxing from the father to make him see the light, because he kept putting him off, though he was leading him and trying to get him to come to the Messiah. It took some pretty strong, almost near death experiences to finally bring him to his senses and to bring him to the Messiah. But he has a lot of insight about this stuff, and of course, being someone who is deeply immersed in the Hebrew, he has a lot more insight into their way of thinking about it and the way it was even in the Hebrew Scripture. Because sometimes, the people that come from that background and that heritage, they just have a greater connection to it, a lot of times, and so they can kind of really bring a lot to it. But anyway, what I want to start out with here is the show, first off, where the father basically forbids this, in Deuteronomy, and I've talked about this before, but it never hurts to reiterate it. In Deuteronomy chapter 6 and in chapter 12, but in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 14 and 15, it says, actually beginning on back at verse 13, this is Deuteronomy chapter 7, or chapter 6, verse 13. Thou shalt fear Yahweh thy Elohim, and serve him, and shalt swear by his name. Ye shall not go after other gods, of the gods of the people which are round about you. For Yahweh thy Elohim is a jealous Elohim among you. Lest the anger of Yahweh thy Elohim be kindled against thee, and destroy thee from off the face of the earth. Ye shall not tempt Yahweh your Elohim as ye tempted him in Massah. And that's in verse 16. So, he's telling you here, you shall not do this. I mean, you do not go after these other gods and of the gods of these people round about you. And of course, that's these ones I just mentioned. And, he tells us too, not to let their names be on your lips. Now that is talking about in just general conversation. Because you can invoke them, and that's not good. But I'm doing this as a study and as a teaching so that you can recognize the hallmarks of these entities and how they operate. This is for people that are not biblically grounded. It's easy for them, I've talked about that, how Satan will give you 99% of the truth and 1% will be a lie and a deception. And that's how these people kept getting deceived over and over again, is because, they would say, oh, well, we do all this stuff. We're over this. We're over, the rain. We're over crops, and we're over this and that. We're really the God you're talking to. And really, they were not. But they would try to, and that's what Antichrist means. It's not just opposed to, it means in place of. So they try to replace Elohim, and they try to replace the Messiah and with their own gods or whatever, and that's what they do. And then here in chapter 12 of Deuteronomy, beginning at verse 28, it says, "Observe and hear all these words which I command thee, that it may go well with thee and with thy children after thee forever, when thou doest that which is good and right in the sight of Elohim. When Yahweh thy Elohim shall cut off the nations before thee, whither thou goest to possess them, and thou succeedest them and dwellest in their land, take heed to thyself that thou be not snared by following them, after that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. Thou shalt not do so unto Yahweh thy Elohim, for every abomination of Yahweh which he hateth hath they done unto their gods, for even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire to their gods. What things soever I command you, observe to do it. Thou shalt not add thereto, nor diminish from it." Okay, so here we have it established. And I've said this over and again, and I tell people when I talk to them, he tells us how he wants to be worshiped and served. We don't tell him. So we don't go and, bring the worship that these people do to their gods. We don't take and bring that and mix it in with our worship of our Messiah and our Elohim. We don't do it. We see it everywhere. We see it in just about all of the mainstream churches in this country. And what's sad is that when the Messiah was here, he was casting these demons out, and so were the apostles. They went around everywhere casting them out. But he talked about how that these demons, when they get cast out, they go out into a dry place and they wander around looking for a place to dwell. And when they can't find it, they say, well, let me go back to the place where I was dwelling at. After you done cleaned and, swept out and cleaned out the house, if they ain't something filling that house, then they're going to come back to it and they're going to bring more with them. That's how they operate. So if you don't have something in your house, in your heart, they'll come back and they'll fill that spot. Something's going to be there. And that's what they've done, is that we've, as a people, We have allowed them back into the house. Because whenever they began in the 60s to cast Elohim out of the churches, out of the schools, out of the government, out of every aspect of our lives, then they found an opening. They found a place to come into. And so just like in, the ancient house of Israel, during the time of Ahab, during the time of Ahaz in Judah, same thing. During the time of Jehoiakim there in the house of Israel, they were doing the same thing. They cast the father out and let these entities in. And of course he hates it. And he just says right there what he'll do. He'll wipe you off the face of the earth. And so America, we opened the door to a cleaned out house, and here they come. Because we cast out our Elohim and our Messiah for these false gods. And of course, once that happens, they don't just take an inch, they take a mile. They come in whole hog. And so I've got some scriptures here to just kind of reiterate this and show you. Of course, I've just showed you there in Deuteronomy what he says about it. Don't do it. Don't do these practices. You worship me the way I tell you to worship me, not the way you want to. And don't bring all this idolatrous practice into the worship, to worshiping me. Because I won't receive it. I'll reject it. And I'll destroy you if you don't repent of it and turn from it. Okay, here in Numbers, when you look here, you see, this is when they're in the wilderness, when these are given to Moses, when he's wrote these down, and they already doing it, and it was Balaam that was trying to get Balak to show them how to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel. Balaam was teaching Balak, and Balak, he says, let's see here, this is in chapter 25 verses 1 through 3, and of course the Lord came to Balaam in his mouth and put a blessing in there, and he blessed the people of Israel instead of cursing them. It says, and when Balaam saw that it pleased Yahweh to bless Israel, he went not as at other times to seek for enchantments, but he set his face towards the wilderness. And Balaam lifted up his eyes, and he saw Israel abiding in his tents according to their tribes, and the spirit of Elohim came upon him, and he took up his parable and said, Balaam, the son of Beor, hath said, and the man whose eyes are open hath said, he hath said, which heard the words of Elohim, which saw the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes open. How goodly are thy tents, O Jacob, and thy tabernacles, O Israel. As the valleys are they spread forth. And so he's blessing them, and then Balak it says, and Balak's anger was kindled against Balaam, and he smote his hands together. And Balak said unto Balaam, I call thee to curse mine enemies, and behold, thou hast altogether blessed them these 3 times. Therefore now flee thou to thy place. I thought to promote thee unto great honor, but lo, Yahweh hath kept thee back from honor. And of course Balak, he's being used of these fallen entities. He's being used to them to try and cast a stumbling block before Israel, because of course they're coming in there to take the land, and they're coming in there to drive out these entities and their offspring and these hybrids and all that stuff that's gotten established there in the land of Canaan. So they're coming to and of course it ain't working out for him, and here Moses said, these people have joined themselves because they turned to idolatry, because what ended up happening was Balaam he did end up telling Balak how to do it through seduction, using the daughters of their daughters, which I think they were Moabites. It says they were using these daughters of the Moabites to seduce the children of Israel, and then the Midianites, they were doing with them too, and so that's how they ended up putting a stumbling block in before them. And of course, as soon as they did, they started worshiping these idols. Like here it says, and Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab. And they called the people unto the sacrifices of their gods, and the people did eat and bowed down to their gods. And Israel joined himself unto Baal Peor, and the anger of Yahweh was kindled against Israel. And Yahweh said unto Moses, take all the heads of the people and hang them up before Yahweh against the sun, that the fierce anger of Yahweh may be turned away from Israel. And Moses said unto the judges of Israel, slay ye every one his men that were joined unto Baal Peor. And of course, so that's what ended up happening to them. I mean, and they, just like whenever Moses went up to receive the law on Sinai, and the people rose up to play, and they fashioned a golden calf. And of course, here I pulled some stuff off of Wikipedia. Now I'm not a big fan of a lot of Wikipedia because they'll skew stuff, but this is pretty much generic stuff. But this is, if you can see this is one of the statues of Baal here, and I think it's got a couple, maybe have another one in here, but that one, and then Beelzebub was always depicted as the Lord of the Flies. I got a picture of a fly there. That's how they depicted him, Beelzebub. But his symbol was a bull, a ram, a thunderbolt, and where was he? He was worshipped all over the Middle East and the Levant. Over in Syria, he was called Halab. Over there in a place called Halab, and around Ugarit, Canaan, North Africa, Middle Kingdom of Egypt, and supposedly his parents. Now, see, this is telling you he was not a fallen angel. He was a hybrid offspring of them, because it says his parents were Dagon, the fish god, and Shalash. So he and Dagon, if you look at the Pope, the hat they wear, the mitre, it's a fish head. Dagon was the fish-headed God-man. And so, they've got this symbology all throughout the Catholic Church. I mean, all through it. And of course, you've got Protestant churches that have got these symbols and stuff that, everywhere, crosses and all that stuff. And of course, you can look at the origins of the cross. It goes way back before the Messiah, back to Egypt and to Babel. I mean, they had these symbols of crosses, and they did not mean anything good. They were used in worship and stuff of their gods. But you can see, I mean, that and this little statue here that I showed you was dating it back to the second millennium BC, 2000 BC, and it was found over there in Tel Megiddo, which is in the northeastern part of Israel. Of course, in that time, Israel wasn't in complete control of it. It was still under the control of the Canaanites and the Rephaim and all that bunch. But, this is probably during the time of Isaac or Jacob, before they had went into Egypt. And because I think that Abraham was around 2500 BC, his time. So, we're talking early on, because most people have come to pretty much to a consensus that the flood happened around 3000 BC, and Noah resettled over there in the area around north and east of the area of Shinar, Babylon, that area up in east of Turkey in the mounts of Ararat. And so they migrated down south over into the land of Shinar, to south and west, and began their idolatry and all that all over again. And that was somewhere around probably 2700 BC, 2800 BC, in that time frame, because Nimrod, which is he's also known as Osiris and Apollo and all these different names, but because he began to become a mighty man, so he was altered some kind of way too, to become a hybrid. But anyway, you can see that these entities, show up really soon to be worshipped, and that was what was going on again before the flood. I mean, they were worshiping these gods because that's what they were portraying themselves as, and they were worshiping the creation rather than the Creator. All right, now we're going to look here in the book of Judges, chapter 8, verse 33. And of course, during this time, they don't have no king over them. They Yahuwah is ruling over them, and he's ruling over them, and through these judges. This is in chapter 8, verses 33 through 35. It says, "And it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel turned again and went a whoring after Baalim, and made Baal-berith their god." And so, and again too, people have a misconception a lot of times about the whoring and prostituting when it's talking about around these religions. They thought that, a lot of people think that these priests and to these false gods and stuff, that they were doing prostitution in the in their places of worship and stuff, but that's not what it's referring to. It's talking about going after false religion, false gods, that, that Elohim is the true Elohim. Yahweh Elohim is the true God, and that anybody that veers away from that is a whore, and they are prostituting themselves. So it's talking about it in a sense, a religious sense. It's not, talking about like the physical act of prostitution or whoring. No, it's using it as a metaphor. And that's the thing is, you got people like Michael Rood that says anybody who takes the Bible literally is a moron, because there's a lot of similes and there's a lot of similitudes and metaphors and stuff in here. But everywhere that there is a metaphor or a simile or a parable, it makes it apparently clear that it is that, and it represents something that is true. It's not just a random thought that is being promoted there with these metaphors. No, they are metaphors describing something that's actually real. But the majority of this book is literal. It is literal. It is not all metaphors. And because, for one, the man that he quotes that says that this is, there's all these metaphors and similes and parables and all in here, that same man was a flat earther. So if he was a flat earther, he had to believe what this says here, that the earth is flat and unmoving. Okay, and so why would you quote from a man and say that it's all metaphors, not literal, when he literally believed that this said that the earth was flat? So who's the moron? But this is, this is the world that we are in. That people will, even people that claim that they're believers will still want to try to make this out to be something that it's not. Well, if you truly are a believer, and if you are born again and filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, He's going to reveal what this is to you. That this is truth, and it is literal, except where it implies that it is a metaphor, or a simile, or a similitude, or a parable, or a type. And it's obvious when it does. It's very obvious. Okay, and so when it's talking about them going to whoring, it's a metaphor. And when you read the context of it, you will find that that's what it's saying. They left from worshiping Elohim to worshiping Baal. They went a whoring. Were they going over and having sex with Baal? No. No, but they left the Father, and they were adulterers. Because, it says that they were like a wife to him. And when they went after these other gods, they were committing adultery. When they went a whoring after these other gods, whenever they went prostituting themselves to these other gods. Yes, it's metaphorical. But when you look at the context it's talking about them going and worshiping other gods, false gods, worshiping the creation instead of worshiping the Creator. And so, but again, anytime it gives you a metaphor like that, when you look at the overall context of what it's talking about, that's implied. But any other time, it's literal. Whatever it's talking about it's literal unless it's otherwise indicated. I mean, Christ talked in parables a lot. And the reason he did was so that the Pharisees in that bunch wouldn't understand what he was talking about. And then afterwards, he would explain to his disciples what he meant, what the meaning of these parables was. And it was literal. It was literal. So, it says, and it came to pass after he did, they was worshiping Baal Berith, their god, and the children of Israel remembered not Yahweh the Elohim, who had delivered them out of the hands of all their enemies on every side. Neither showed they kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, which is Gideon, according to all the goodness which he had showed unto Israel, because he had, fought and was a judge, and was also a high priest, and he told them they wanted to make him a ruler over them, and he wouldn't do it. He said, no. Now he did kind of go, do a little something he shouldn't have. Whenever they had defeated the Ishmaelites, they all wore earrings, gold earrings, which was the symbol of the Ishmaelites. And so he said, well, if y'all want to do something for me, bring all the jewelry that you took, the booty or whatever, off of the Ishmaelites and bring it here to me. And so he took it, and it was a lot, because they killed a bunch of them. Hundreds of thousands of them. And so it turned out it was 1,700 shekels of gold, beside the ornaments and the collars and the purple raiment and all that was on the kings of the Midians, and beside the chains that were about their camels' necks, because the camels had decorations on them too. And he took it back with him. He made an ephod, which was a container. I've talked about the ephod. He made a container to put it in, and he carried it back to Ophrah. And all Israel went thither a whoring after it, which thing became a snare unto Gideon. In other words, these people, they were lusting after this gold. They came up there, worshiping gold. And it was a kind of a snare to him because of that. But we see that's, as soon as he died, because he was one that was keeping them in line. He was a judge. He was judging them, and whenever they would get out of line, start trying to go off into that stuff, he would bring them back in line. But once he died, they went right back to doing what they were doing. And I would encourage you, whenever I do one of these studies, go read some of these scriptures, and read the around it, read the whole book, the whole chapter that I just told you there, chapter 8 and 9. It gives you a lot of the and this is also talks a lot about these judges and these mighty men of Israel, and the ones that done wrong, the ones that done right, and tried to keep them, straight. All right, now, and I'm going to go to Kings, 1 Kings, chapter 16, verse 30 and 33 through 33. And this is during the time of, I think this is, during the time of Ahab, when he had married Jezebel, and she was the daughter of Naboth, not Naboth, but Omri, I think was her father. No, he was the son of Omri. I don't want to tell you wrong here. Anyway, she, when he married her, she brought all of her gods with her, and which was Baal and Ashtoreth. Brought them there, and that's what I'm gonna read here. And see, they'll give you a lot of times. They'll give you a marker, a time marker here. It says, and in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, began Ahab the son of Omri to reign over Israel, the house of Israel. And Acos, Asa was king of Judah at that time. So it's saying in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, began Ahab the son of Omri to reign over Israel. And Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. And it says, and Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of Yahweh above all that were before him. Because for one, Jeroboam was the one that led the revolt against Rehoboam and divided the kingdom up into two different kingdoms. And he was pretty wicked. But it says here that Ahab had done wickeder than all that had come before him. And it came to pass as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that he took the wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. So he married this daughter of this Zidonian, and he, when he did, he went up there to Zidonia and began to worship Baal and and serve him. And it says he reared up an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. And Ahab made a grove, and Ahab did more to provoke Yahweh Elohim of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel that were before him. And, and when it says he made a grove, that was Ashtoreth. Her sign is the tree, the grove. And she also sometimes is represented by an owl. And sometimes she's called Lilith, supposedly the first wife of Adam, which is a lie. That ain't so. But she is also called the Queen of Heaven, Ishtar, Astarte, Semiramis, the Blessed Virgin Mary. She's called all of these things. And of course, next time I'll get on her. But this one's pretty much but I just wanted to point that out, that he built a grove too to Ashtoreth. That's why it always talks about, when a righteous king would come along, he'd destroy the groves and the high places. But they got so, bad from time, at times to where they would actually set these things up inside the temple in Jerusalem. Got bad. But anyway, you can see there, he's talking about how Ahab, and we'll see too, as we go along here about Elijah, the man of Yahweh. He brought him down a notch, destroyed their priests and their altars and everything else. And boy, Ahab and Jezebel, they didn't like it at all. let's look here at 1 Kings 18. 18, 17, and it's 17 through 46. And it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah that Ahab said unto him, Art thou he that troubleth Israel? And Elijah answered him, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, in that ye have forsaken the commandments of Yahweh, and thou hast followed Baalim. Now therefore send and gather to me all Israel unto Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal 450, and the prophets of the groves 400, which eat at Jezebel's table. So here's Elijah. He's summoning these priests, these priests of Baal and Ashtoreth. Bring them on. So Ahab sent unto all the children of Israel, and gathered the prophets together unto Mount Carmel. Because one thing too, a lot of the prophets of Israel fell right in with these people. I mean, they done it over and over again. I mean, like I talked about before, when they went to Babylon, falling in with some of them over there. The Kabbalah and the Talmud and all that stuff. That's where that come from. So Ahab sent and gathered them all up, and Elijah came unto all the people and said, How long halt ye between two opinions? In other words, they were going, they were playing whores. They were playing harlots. They were going back and forth. That they were going to the temple down there, taking part in that worship. And then they were going to these groves and these high places and taking part in that worship too. Polytheistic instead of monotheistic. And if Yahweh be Elohim, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the people answered him not a word. Then said Elijah unto the people, even I only remain a prophet of Yahweh. I mean, he was the only true prophet of Yahweh at that point. There was no others. They'd all forsaken him. But Baal's prophets are 450 men. Let them therefore give us 2 bullocks, and let them choose 1 bullock for themselves, and cut it in pieces, and lay it on wood, and put no fire under it. And I will dress the other bullock, and lay it on wood, and put no fire under. And call ye on the name of your gods, and I will call on the name of Yahweh, and the Elohim that answereth by fire, let him be Elohim. And all the people answered and said, It is well spoken. And Elijah said unto the prophets of Baal, Choose ye 1 bullock for yourselves, and dress it first, for ye are many, and call on the name of your Elohims, but put no fire under it. And they took the bullock which was given them, and they dressed it, and called on the name of Baal from morning even until noon, saying, O Baal, hear us. But there was no voice, nor any that answered. And they leaped upon the altar which was made. And it came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is talking, or he is pursuing, or he is in a journey, or peradventure he sleepeth, and must be awakened. And they cried aloud, and they cut themselves after their manner with knives and lances, till the blood gushed out upon them. And it came to pass when, we see this stuff happening all over the place this day. People cutting themselves, just for apparently no reason. I mean, and it came to pass when midday was past, and they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, that there was neither voice, nor any to answer, nor any that regarded. And Elijah said unto all the people, Come near unto me. And all the people came near unto him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. And Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, unto whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Israel shall be thy name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of Yahweh, and he made a trench about the altar, as great as would contain 2 measures of seed. And of course, in the margin here, it says it was a seah, containing just under 1 1/4 pecks. So, in our measurements, I think it's 4 pecks make a bushel or something like that. So you're looking at roughly, if it was 2 measures of it, that would have been 2.5 pecks, so about 1/2 bushel or so. And he put the wood in order and cut the bullock in pieces and laid him on the wood and said, fill 4 barrels with water and pour it on the burnt sacrifice and on the wood. And he said, do it the second time. And they did it the second time. And he said, do it the third time. And they did it the third time. And the water round about the altar. And he filled the trench also with water. And it came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Yahweh Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and of Israel, let it be known this day that thou art Elohim in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and that I have done all these things at thy word. Hear me, O Yahweh, hear me, that this people may know that thou art the Yahweh Elohim, and that thou hast turned their heart back again. Then the fire of Yahweh fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. I mean, it burned up even the rocks. I mean, you're talking about sending a message. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, Yahweh, he is the Elohim. Yahweh, he is the Elohim. And Elijah said unto them, take the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And they took them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon, and slew them there. And Elijah said unto Ahab, get thee up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of abundance of rain. Because he had caused it to stop raining, for like 3.5 years. They didn't get no rain. And because they had these idols and these groves and stuff. And Elijah went up to the top of Carmel, and he cast himself down on the earth and put his face between his knees and said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. And of course his servant was Elisha. And said, there is nothing. And he said, go again 7 times. And it came to pass at the 7th time that he said, behold, there ariseth a little cloud out of the sea like a man's hand. And he said, go up, say unto Ahab, prepare thy chariot, and get thee down, that the rain stop thee not. And it came to pass in the meanwhile that the heaven was black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. And the hand of Yahweh was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. So, and of course, he went there to tell Jezebel what had happened with her prophets. And she wasn't happy. I mean, she sent a decree out to kill, Elijah. But anyway, I mean, that's what was going on there. But over and over again they did this stuff. And then here in 2 Kings, I think it's 2 Kings chapter 1. I would say read the whole chapter, but this is concerning Elijah as well. And this is after the death of Ahab. But it says, then Moab rebelled against Israel after the death of Ahab, and Ahaziah fell down through a lattice in his upper chamber that was in Samaria. Now this is the house of Israel. I mean, most of this is about the house of Israel. Because they, from the time that they had been, founded with Jeroboam to the time of Jehoiakim, when they went into captivity under the Assyrians, which was 390 years, they were in idolatry the whole time, pretty much. They just wouldn't stop. And Ahaziah fell down through a lattice in his upper room chamber that was in Samaria and was sick. And he sent messengers and said unto them, Go inquire of Baalzebub, the god of Ekron, whether I shall recover of this disease. But the angel of Yahweh said to Elijah the Tishbite, Arise, go up to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and say unto them, Is it not because there is not a Elohim in Israel that ye go to inquire of Baalzebub, the god of Ekron? Now therefore, thus saith Yahweh, Thou shalt not come down from that bed on which thou art gone up, but thou shalt surely die. And Elijah departed. And when the messengers turned back unto him, he said unto them, Why are ye now turned back? And they said unto him, There came a man up to meet us, and saith unto us, Go turn again unto the king that sent you, and say to him, Thus saith Yahweh, Is it not because there is not an Elohim in Israel that thou sendest to inquire of Baalzebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore thou shalt not come down from that bed on which thou art gone up, but shalt surely die. And he said unto them, What manner of man was he which came up to meet you, and told you these words? And they answered him, He was an hairy man, and girt with a girdle of leather about his loins. And he said, It is Elijah the Tishbite. Then the king sent unto him a captain of 50 with his 50, and sent him up to him. And behold, he sat on the top of an hill, and he spake unto him, Thou man of Elohim, the king hath said, Come down. And Elijah answered him and said to the captain of 50, If I be a man of Elohim, then let fire come down from heaven and consume thee and thy 50. And there came down fire from heaven and consumed him and his 50. Again also he sent unto him another captain of 50 with his 50. And he answered and said unto him, O man of Elohim, thus hath the king said, Come down quickly. And Elijah answered and said unto them, If I be a man of Elohim, let fire come down from heaven and consume thee and thy 50. And the fire of Elohim came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50. And again he sent 50, a captain, and a third 50 with him. And the third captain of 50 went up and came and fell on his knees before Elijah and besought him and said unto him, O man of Elohim, I pray thee, let my life and the life of these 50 thy servants be precious in thy sight. Behold, there came fire down from heaven and burned up the two captains of the former 50s with their 50s. Therefore, let my life now be precious in thy sight. And the angel of the Lord said unto Elijah, Go down with him, be not afraid of him. And he arose and went down with him unto the king. And he said unto him, Thus saith Yahweh, For as much as thou hast sent messengers to inquire of Beelzebub, the Elohim of Ekron, is it not because there is no Elohim in Israel to inquire of his word? Therefore thou shalt not come down off that bed on which thou art gone up, but shalt surely die. So he died according to the word of Yahweh which Elijah had spoken. And Jehoram reigned in his stead in the 2nd year of Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, because he had no son. Now the rest of the acts of Ahaziah, which he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? So, you see that because of them going after Baal-zebub to inquire after him rather than to inquire after the true Elohim, he died for it. And that was the whole chapter of chapter 1. I read the whole chapter, verse 1 through 18. Now we're going to look at 2 Chronicles. And this is 2 Chronicles 28. Chapter 28, verses 1 through 3. And again, and this here is talking about Judah. Because this is Ahaz was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem, because that was the capital of Judah. But he did not that which was right in the sight of Yahweh, like David his father. For he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. In other words, he was doing like the northern kingdom, and made also molten images for Baalim. Moreover, he burnt incense in the valley of the son of Hinnom, and burnt his children in the fire after the abominations of the heathen whom Yahweh had cast out before the children of Israel. In other words, he was down there burning, sacrificing to Moloch. So, doing the same thing that they were doing up there in Samaria. They'd done the same thing. They'd set up a golden calf or bronze calf in Samaria and up in the area of Dan. I think that's where Ekron was. I'm not sure exactly, but I think that's where it was. And they had two of them. And of course, the symbol for, I said a while ago, the symbol for Baal is a bull or a ram or what was it? Thunderbolt. The thunderbolt represents him a lot too, because he's supposedly the god of weather. All right, and let's look here in Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 19. Well, I'm going to read this here right quick, because this is talking about Ashtoreth worship. And I've talked about this before when I was talking about the pagan holidays. Hear ye the word, this is chapter 10 of Jeremiah, verse 1. And we'll go down to verse 5. Hear ye the word which Yahweh speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Again, here, this is talking to the house of Israel, but this is during, this is before the children of Israel Judah went into captivity, but because he was in captivity, Jeremiah had been put in prison by, I think it was Zedekiah, put him in prison. So, this here is really kind of a lot of Jeremiah, just like Ezekiel, is talking future tense. It's because at the time of Jeremiah, the house of Israel had been in captivity for over 100 years. I mean, there was no house of Israel anymore in the land of Israel. But he's speaking to them. And I'd say this is really kind of probably speaking to our time. Said, hear ye O house of Israel, thus saith Yahweh, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven. For the heathen are dismayed by them. For the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not. They are upright as the palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be born, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good. And of course, we're talking about a Christmas tree. But the tree, like I said, symbolizes Ashtoreth and the worship of Ashtoreth. And when I get into that next week on the next one of these, I'll talk about that. But let me get to Jeremiah 19 here. 19, verses 4 through 9. It says, because they have forsaken me, and have estranged this place, and have burned incense in it unto other gods, whom neither they nor their fathers have known, nor the kings of Judah. It's talking about they were burning it in the temple. And they had set up these things in the temple and around it. But you burn incense in it unto other gods, whom neither they nor their fathers have known, nor the kings of Judah have filled this place with the blood of incense. They have built also the high places of Baal to burn their sons with fire for burnt offerings unto Baal, which I commanded not, nor spake it, neither came it into my mind. In other words, he never thought about doing nothing like that. Therefore, behold, the days come, saith Yahweh, that this place shall no more be called Tophet, nor the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. And I will make void the counsel of Judah and Jerusalem in this place, and I will cause them to fall by the sword before their enemies, and by the hands of them that seek their lives, and their carcasses will I give to be meat for the fowls of the heavens, and for the beasts of the earth. And I will make this city desolate and an hissing. Every one that passeth thereby shall be astonished and hiss because of all the plagues thereof. And I will cause them to eat the flesh of their sons and the flesh of their daughters, and they shall eat every one the flesh of his friend in the siege and straitness wherewith their enemies, and they that seek their lives shall straiten them. This is talking about whenever Babylon laid siege to Jerusalem and starved them out to the point where they began to eat their own children, and they would say, hey, today we'll eat mine and tomorrow we'll eat yours. That's just how bad it got. And because they were down there in that valley of Hinnom at the high place called Tophet, and they were burning their children down there to Baal and Moloch. And then here in Matthew 12, of course, I've talked about Matthew 12 before. How about Beelzebub being the prince of the demons. Chapter 12, verse 27, it says, and if I by Beelzebub, well, let's back up here just a little bit. It says in verse 24, but when the Pharisees heard it, that he'd been casting out these devils, they said, this fellow doth not cast out devils, but by Beelzebub, the prince of the devils. And Yahushua knew their thoughts, and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. And if Satan cast out Satan, or in other words, if the adversary cast out the adversary, how shall his kingdom stand? And so, and if I by Beelzebub cast out devils, by whom do your children cast them out? Therefore they shall be your judges. So, this entity's, always around. I mean, all throughout. And then we're going to look here at 1 Corinthians. And this is Paul, of course. 1 Corinthians, the 10th chapter, verse 20. But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to Elohim. I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils. You cannot drink the cup of Yahweh and the cup of devils. You cannot be partakers of Yahweh's table and of the table of devils. You can't. You can't have fellowship with both. So you got to choose, like Joshua said, choose ye this day whom you shall serve. As for me and my house, we shall serve Yahuwah. So, serve the true Elohim. But, and he's talking about these, the Gentiles that he was trying to reach around there. I mean, the people there in Ephesus, they worshipped at the temple of Diana, Ishtar, Ashtaroth, same thing. And, again, I ain't going to get into that now because I will talk about that on the next one because it's going to be focused on Ashtoreth. But anyway, here in, I'm going to turn back again to Hosea. And, what's funny is that some of these books are not in the order of their being written. Hosea is after the book of Daniel, but Hosea was written before the book of Daniel because you just have to look at who it's talking about. It says, the word of the Lord that came unto Hosea, the son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. Okay, so Jeroboam was the king of the house of Israel after the nation had went through a civil war and broken up. So Hosea's alive back, in 739, actually even earlier than that, probably around 900 BC. Daniel, on the other hand, is around 500 BC. So you're talking 400 years difference. But see, when they ordered when they put the King James together, they just, they had what they call the major prophets and the minor prophets. The major prophets would be Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, and then minor prophets, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, and all these smaller books. They called them minor books, not because they are minor, the prophecies are minor, but because they were just small books. And the major prophets because they were large books. They were a lot of chapters or whatever. And in fact, back then, before then, they were not, there were no chapters and verses and stuff. It just read continuously. I mean, they would be, like periods and stuff like that to end a sentence or whatever. But I mean, as far as markers, to mark places, like when I'd say, okay, go look at Hosea chapter 1, verse 1. Well, then you can come in here and you can go to the book of Hosea and find chapter 1, verse 1. But they didn't have that. If they just said, go look up this verse, and they would quote a verse. Well, you'd have to go get the scroll of Hosea and roll it out until you located that verse. Unless you were very familiar with it. So they added chapters and verses for convenience of, so that when somebody would tell you a certain chapter and a certain verse, you could readily go to it. It just simplifies it. But it says here in Hosea, and and what I was wanting to bring to point here was that they were doing the same thing. That this is during the time when they had set up those idols up there in Samaria and up in Dan, I think Ekron, up in Dan, and the father told Hosea to marry a harlot, and he had 2 children with her, and he named these children, and one of them he says, and the Lord said unto him, call his name Jezreel for yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. And he did under the Assyrians, but and it says, and it shall come to pass that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. And that's probably where they finally got their final defeat, was in Jezreel. And she conceived again and bare a daughter, and Elohim said unto him, call her name Lo-Ruhamah, and I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. Now this is something kind of interesting here. The valley of Jezreel, that's where Megiddo is, or Armageddon. And it says, and it comes to pass at that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. And, when you read what it talks about, the northern army, these people, the Assyrians coming down into that part of Israel in the latter days, and the house of Israel, the British Commonwealth in America, says I will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel, but he will save a remnant out of it. But it says, then shall the children of Judah and the children of Israel be gathered together and appoint themselves one head, and they shall come up out of the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel. And he told them that this other kid's name means, Lo-Ruhamah, means, ye are not my people, and I will not be your Elohim. And that was because of their idolatry. They'd hoard and hoard and hoard. So this was all, again, here's one of those similes, types. This is a simile of, you married this whore, and her name was Gomer. You marry her, and she was a whore, and then he had 2 children by her, or she had 2 children with him, and they were named, basically, you no longer my people, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, which conceived and bare him a son. And the Lord said unto him, call his name Jezreel for yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. And so, that was the point of that is to show you that sometimes that's how he will refer to these idolatrous people as whores or prostitutes. That's what they did, is they, are adulterers. And when he's doing that, yes, that is a metaphor or a type or a simile. And he tells us that he speaks to us in similitudes. I mean, it's not like it's a mystery or something. No, he tells us but it's also apparent when he does. The rest of the time, it's literal. And whenever he's talking to us, like here, when he's talking about this, he's talking about something that really is happening or that will happen. But he's just using a type to show you in type what's going to happen. And to just basically give you, hey man, this is what they're acting like. Yeah, they're idolaters and they're worshiping these false gods and stuff like that. They're like whores. They're like an adulterous woman that has left her husband and went a whoring after other men. That's basically what it's saying, but instead they left the true Elohim, their husband, and went whoring after other gods. Namely, the premier one is always Baal. But then you have the other one, and like I say, we'll talk about that next time. One thing I did want to show you, and I've talked about this, or maybe I mentioned this before, the Father's name, how it got changed. And this is in Jeremiah chapter 23. And when you go look this word up, it can have multiple meanings depending on the context. But it says, I have heard what, this is in Jeremiah chapter 23, starting at verse 25. I have heard what the prophets said, that prophesied lies in my name, saying, I have dreamed, I have dreamed. How long shall this be in the heart of the prophets, that they prophesy lies? Yea, they are prophets of the deceit of their own heart. Sound familiar with what's going on today? These deceiving prophets that are prophesying what's out of their own heart and mind, but not prophesying what is coming from Him. I mean, and they never, they keep coming out saying, I got a prophecy, It never happens. They don't come in, and this is what's ironic about these people, is that people keep following them. Even when they're wrong, and it doesn't come to pass, they'll come back the next week, and these people say, I got a prophecy, and it never happens. And yet these people are so deluded and brainwashed by these false teachers that they keep coming back and listening to them. I just don't get it. It says, which prophets of the deceit of their own heart, which think to cause my people to forget my name by their dreams, which they tell every man to his neighbor, as their fathers have forgotten my name for Baal. Okay, when you look at the word Baal, if you go into the Hebrew lexicon, the Hebrew part of the concordance, it is 1168, and it means Lord or Master. But it can also mean, if it's like Baal, B with a little hook and an L, it can mean Adon, or it can be Adonai, depending on the context that it's being used. But most of the time, it is the Tetragrammaton, YHWH, which is the Father's name, Yahuwah. You have to understand that the Hebrews did not have vowels in their alphabet. They were inferred by the arrangement of the consonants. However the consonants were arranged would tell you pretty much what the vowel sound would be. Like between the Y and the H, an A. And between the W and H, or the H and the W would be an U or woo. But it was, and these people that try to say that it's Yahovah, the thing is the V was a later construct. It was a later construct that was made because whenever you were trying to engrave in stone, it was very difficult to make a U. It was, it was hard to make a U without damaging the stone. So they came up with the V and used the V in the place of a U. But the U, its sound's always been U, the U sound. And so between the H and the W is an U, and then between the W and the H is an A. Yahuwah. Some people say Yahuwah. But, I was taught by somebody that was Jewish, that his parents were Christians and his grandparents were Christians that came over from Syria, and they originally had been from Nazareth, same place as the Messiah, but during the time of, and I've talked, kind of getting a little old talking about the Bar Kokhba, but when they got drove out of Israel by the Romans, they went all over the Middle East, and some of them settled in Syria, some of them settled in Lebanon, and Iraq, or what's present day Iraq, and Jordan, and all around, and so, but a lot of them had been converted, when Paul was on his missionary journeys, and later apostles, that were the apostle or the disciples of the apostles, people like Polycarp and Clement and Timotheus and Timothy and Titus and different ones. So it says, the prophet that has a dream, let him tell a dream, and he that hath my word, let him speak my word faithfully. What is the chaff to the wheat, saith Yahuwah? Is not my word like as a fire, saith Yahuwah, and like a hammer that breaketh the rock in pieces? Therefore, behold, I am against the prophets, saith Yahuwah, that steal my words, every one from his neighbor. Behold, I am against the prophets, saith Yahuwah, that use their tongues and say, he saith. And so, everywhere you see in Scripture where the word Lord is, unless depending on the context. Now, like in the New Testament, a lot of times when it's talking about the Messiah, it's, it's Master or Adonai. It's not Baal. But they used Baal, and even back early on, it was pretty much what happened is that these people that worship these false gods began to use the word Baal as master, and it got basically ended up that it became a proper name for this god. And so, and when that began to happen, the Hebrew people quit using it. In the sense of master or Adonai or whatever, they quit using it in that context. Or Lord. They quit using it for that because, and even began to change some of the names of the people that had it in there, like Jerubbaal, Baal. They would change it to like Jeruba Sheoth or Shiboth or something like that, which is shame, it means shame or whatever, because they didn't want to use Baal anymore in their names because it had been corrupted by these people, the Amorites and the Horites and that bunch. But anyway, that kind of ends what I want to talk about today. And next week I'll do one on Ashtoreth. But I wanted to point out the main thing is that we can see how the spirits of these entities have come back. The evil gods have returned. And, after the Messiah, they drove them out. The early, the apostles and early Christians and all pretty much run them out. Well, like I said about how when they leave a house clean, they want to, they go out into a dry place and they want to come back to the house that they were in. And when they come back, they bring 7 worse than they are. What do you think's happened here in America compared to the ancient house of of Israel? They were cast out of there when the Messiah came, and now they're coming back and they're bringing back 7 times as many, and the state of that man is worse than it was at the beginning. That's what it says about the man that has the demon cast out of him. Imagine about a nation that, pretty much honored this and had it in everything, had it in our schools, had it in our public square, in our government, and then just boom, it started being taken out of everything and challenged, and then the next thing you know, what is it? The 7 times as many of them have come back. And it says that man's state, the end of his state was worse than the beginning. Because he now has got 7 times as many of them in him. So it's the same with this country. The house of Israel, they, because they had the house cleaned out and they had the right Elohim dwelling there and the Messiah, now that they've kicked him out, that house was empty. When they kicked him out, these demons came back. And I mean, they came back with a vengeance, and they filled that space. So the state, their latter state is worse than their first. And unfortunately, I warn people. I tell them, hey, you need to repent. Of course, a lot of them won't do it. But, there will be a remnant saved. So do yourself a little homework on this stuff, and get it in your mind, and how to recognize these entities, and to warn people about them, and to be able to show them these entities and how they manifest themselves. People don't, they can't see it because they're blind. But anyway, folks, I love you. I thank you for joining me. I pray that this will be informative for you. And as always, be good Bereans. Don't take my word for it. Do your homework. Go study. And like I say, you can print some of this stuff off of Wikipedia, and you can go on there and look at it. Their definitions and stuff. And there's other places you can find this information about these entities. But you can kind of get the truth of it from here, and you get the idea about how they manifest themselves and the end result of it. It ultimately ends up in sacrifice and, sacrificing humans and it comes to no good end. And of course, ultimately the true believers, the elect of the Messiah and of Elohim, we're going to be their sacrifice. They're going to come after us, and it's going to be the religious system. It's going to be the religious system of these false gods that's going to do it. I mean, it's the way it always is. But anyway, with that, I love you folks, and I hope you'll be blessed. And until next time, next Shabbat, I'll see you if Yahweh's willing. To